the town of Lindura was always full of life. The air was warm, filled with the scent of roasted maize, ripe fruits, and the sound of laughter from street children chasing each other along the dusty road. In this busy place lived Zuri, a young woman known for her beauty and confidence. She came from a wealthy family and everyone in town knew her father, Mr. Mbeel, the man who owned half the transport trucks that passed through the region. Zuri's life was easy and comfortable. She lived in a big house with shining floors, servants who greeted her every morning, and her own car parked outside. Yet, in her heart, something was missing. She often looked out from her balcony and wondered what real happiness felt like. Her friends cared only about fashion, parties, and money. She listened to their laughter but felt lonely inside. One Saturday morning, Zuri decided to go to the village market by herself. Normally, her driver or maid would do the shopping, but she wanted to see the real life of the town, the part that her rich world never touched. She wore a simple dress, tied her hair up, and walked out with a small basket in her hand. The market was alive with color and noise. Women shouted prices, children carried baskets, and old men played drums under a mango tree. The smell of fresh vegetables and sweet fruit filled the air. Zuri smiled as she walked through the narrow rows of stalls. For the first time in a long while, she felt free. She stopped by a stall where ripe mangoes and bananas were arranged neatly in piles. Behind the stall stood a young man. His clothes were simple and slightly dusty from the road, but his smile was warm. His skin glowed under the sun, and his eyes were calm, eyes that spoke of patience and honesty. "Good morning, madam," he said politely. "Would you like some mangoes? They're fresh from the farm." Zuri looked at him and smiled. "They look perfect. How much for 3? 50 shillings, he said, wiping his hands with a cloth. She handed him 100. "Keep the change," she said softly. But instead of taking it, the man smiled. "Your smile is enough payment," he replied. Zuri was taken aback. She wasn't used to such words. Most men in town either tried to impress her or stared at her with greed. But this man's tone was pure, simple, and kind. She couldn't help but laugh. "Then I'll have to buy more mangoes so you don't lose business." The man chuckled too. "I'm Cato," he said, "and you're welcome to buy all the mangoes you want." "Zuri," she replied. "Nice to meet you, Cato." As she walked away, she found herself smiling without reason. That night, she couldn't forget his gentle voice. Something about him stayed in her heart. The next week, she returned to the market again. "You're back," Cato said, smiling. "Out of mangoes already?" Zuri laughed. "Maybe. Or maybe I just wanted to see if your fruits were still the sweetest." He handed her a ripe mango. "Try this one. It's from the tree near my home. My mother says it's lucky." She took a bite and laughed. "Your mother is right. It's perfect." From that day on, Zuri kept returning, sometimes to buy fruit, sometimes just to talk. They spoke about small things, the weather, the harvest, and the stories of the people around them. Cato told her how he woke up every day before sunrise to water his crops. He talked about the land, the rain, and how he dreamed of building something bigger one day, a small fruit company that could help local farmers earn a better living. Zuri listened, amazed. She had met many rich men in the city, but none spoke with such love for simple things. There was honesty in his eyes, the kind that money could never buy. One afternoon, while the sun was setting behind the hills, they sat under a big acacia tree near the river. The air was cool, and the sky painted shades of orange and gold. Cato told her about his childhood, how his father had died when he was young, and how his mother had taught him to work hard and stay humble. "My father used to say," Cato began, "no job is too small if you do it with heart. That's why I work with joy even when the sun burns." Zuri looked at him, moved by his words. "You speak like a man with wisdom," she said softly. He smiled. "You speak like a woman who listens. Not many do." That moment felt special. The world around them seemed to fade. Only the sound of the wind and the soft murmur of the river remained. After that, Zuri began to help Cato at the market sometimes. She would laugh with the other vendors and carry baskets of fruit, her soft hands getting slightly dirty for the first time. The other women whispered, "Who is this rich girl helping a farmer?" But Zuri didn't care. Every time she was near Cato, she felt alive. Days turned into weeks and soon, everyone in the market knew them. The two laughed together, shared roasted maize by the roadside, and walked home along the dusty path. Sometimes Cato would carry her basket and she would tease him. "You're making me lazy." "And what's wrong with that?" he'd laugh. "A little rest never hurts." She had never known such simple happiness. At home, her parents noticed the change in her. She smiled more, talked more kindly to the workers, and seemed lighter in spirit. but they never guessed the reason. Zuri's mother once asked, "You go to that market too often, my dear? What could be so interesting there?" "Just the fruits, Mama," Zuri said with a secret smile. But in her heart, she knew it was much more than fruits. One evening it started to rain while Zuri was at the market. The crowd ran for cover and the air filled with laughter and splashes. Cato quickly covered his fruits with a sheet and motioned for her to stand under the tree. They stood close together, both getting a little wet. "You'll catch a cold," Cato said, removing his jacket and placing it over her shoulders. Zuri looked up at him, rain dripping from her hair. "You'll get wet now." He smiled. "Rain doesn't hurt a farmer. It feeds his crops." She laughed softly, feeling her heart beat faster. At that moment she realized that what she felt wasn't just friendship anymore, it was love. When the rain stopped, they walked home together through the muddy path. The air smelled of wet soil and fresh leaves. Zuri wanted to tell him how she felt, but fear held her tongue. As they reached the road, Cato turned to her and said, "You're different from others, Zuri. You don't see people by what they have." She smiled, looking into his eyes. "And you, Cato, are different from anyone I've ever met." He laughed softly. "Maybe that's why you keep buying mangoes you don't need." They both laughed, and in that laughter, something pure grew stronger, something that neither money nor distance could destroy. That night, Zuri sat by her window holding the mango Cato had given her. The moonlight touched her face and she whispered, "Why do I feel this way?" She knew the answer: she had fallen in love. But she also knew her world and his were far apart. Still, she couldn't help but smile. For the first time in her life, her heart was full, not with wealth or things but with something real, something deep. Each new morning brought Zuri and Cato closer than the one before. The market had become their secret world, a place where the noise of traders and the laughter of children covered their quiet conversations. Whenever she saw Cato arranging his fruits, Zuri's heart filled with a joy she could not explain. She had grown up surrounded by comfort, but Cato's simple world made her feel alive in a way that silk dresses and rich dinners never could. After a few days they began to meet beyond the market. Zuri would walk down to the big baobab tree near the river, where the air smelled of fresh grass and the water shimmered under the sun. There they sat together on smooth stones, watching birds fly across the sky. Cato would bring her ripe mangoes or roasted maize, and she would tell him stories about her school and city life. Cato liked listening to her voice. She spoke softly with laughter in her words, but he could see her eyes carried something deeper, a wish for peace. "You don't belong to the noise," he told her once. "You belong to quiet places like this." Zuri smiled. "Then maybe I've found where I belong." They spent hours together under that tree. Sometimes they said nothing at all, just sat close and listened to the sound of the river. Cato told her about his farm, how he woke up before dawn to milk the cows, how he sang while planting seeds, and how rain felt like a blessing after long dry days. He talked about his late father, who had taught him that hard work was the true wealth of a man. "My hands are rough," Cato said one afternoon, looking at them. "They were made for soil, not for soft things." Zuri reached out and touched them gently. "These hands grow life, Cato. They should be proud." Cato looked at her and smiled. No one had ever spoken to him like that. Her words sank deep into his heart, like rain sinking into dry earth. As days passed, Zuri started visiting the market less and the riverside more. Her maid wondered why she always came home smelling of grass and sunshine. Her parents noticed her happiness, but they thought it was just because of her new friends or hobbies. None of them knew that she was falling in love with a farmer, a man her family would never approve of. Zuri knew it too. But love had already taken root, and no fear could pull it out. One afternoon, when the sun was bright and the sky blue, Cato and Zuri sat under the baobab tree again. He looked at her for a long moment, then said quietly, "Zuri, I must tell you something. You are from a family that has everything. I'm just a poor farmer. If your parents find out, they won't allow this." Zuri shook her head quickly. "Cato, money doesn't matter to me." He sighed. "Maybe not now, but one day it might. Love doesn't fill a table, Zuri. It doesn't buy food or build houses." She smiled sadly. "Then I'll learn to live the way you live. I'd rather eat little with peace than feast without love." Cato looked into her eyes, searching for doubt, but found none. Her words touched him deeply. He wanted to believe her, but he also wanted to protect her from the pain that might come. Still, her love gave him strength and he couldn't resist her warmth. They decided to keep their love a secret, at least for now. Every few days they met by the river, talking about dreams that felt too big for their world. Zuri spoke about opening a small school for poor children one day, and Cato said he wanted to buy more land for farming. Maybe one day, Zuri said softly, we'll do both together. Kato smiled. That day will be my dream come true. Their secret love made even small things feel magical. Sometimes Zuri would sneak out of her house in the early morning, pretending to go for a walk. She would run down the quiet paths, her sandals brushing through dew-covered grass, until she saw Kato waiting with a shy smile and a basket of fresh fruit. He would say, "You came." And she would laugh. "You thought I wouldn't?" He would hand her a mango or an orange and they would sit together, sharing one fruit between them. Life felt simple, almost too simple for someone like Zuri who had never known hardship. But she loved every moment. There was a peace in the way Kato moved, slow, patient, and full of purpose. He worked hard all day and even when his back hurt he never complained. "The land gives what you give it," he told her once. "If you work with care it rewards you." Zuri admired him more with every word. He spoke of life like a teacher, though he had never been to any great school. One afternoon the wind blew softly through the baobab leaves. Zuri and Kato sat side by side, their hands almost touching. The air between them was quiet and full of unspoken things. Finally Zuri whispered, "Do you ever think about the future?" Kato looked at her. "Every day. But I don't know where it leads." "You're from a different world, Zuri. A world that might never accept mine." She turned toward him, her eyes shining. "Then I'll choose your world instead." He laughed softly. "You say it like it's easy." "It is when you love someone," she said. Kato's heart beat faster. For a moment he didn't know what to say. He wanted to tell her how much she meant to him, how her laughter filled his days, how her presence made even the hardest work feel light. But words felt too small for what he felt. So instead he took her hand gently. Neither of them spoke again for a long while. The river flowed beside them, the birds sang above, and the sun slowly set behind the hills. It was one of those quiet moments that said more than 1,000 words. As the days passed, their love deepened. Zuri began writing small letters to Kato, hiding them in the basket where he kept his fruits. He would read them late at night, smiling in the dim light of his lantern. Sometimes she drew little hearts or wrote, "When I see you, my world feels right." Kato would reply with simple words like, "You are the sun in my morning." Their secret world grew stronger but also more fragile. Each time Zuri heard her parents talk about her future, the rich families they wanted her to marry into, her heart tightened. She wished she could tell them the truth, but she knew they would never understand. One evening her father mentioned a man named Baraka, the son of a wealthy businessman. "He's coming from the city next week," Mr. Mbeal said. "A fine young man, educated and polite. I want you to meet him." Zuri smiled weakly, her stomach twisting. She nodded but said nothing. That night she went to the river and found Kato waiting under the moonlight. She ran into his arms and whispered, "My father wants me to meet another man." Kato froze, his heart sinking. "Then it's time," he said softly. "You can't hide forever, Zuri. They'll find out." She looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "Then let them find out." "I won't lose you, Kato." He brushed a tear from her cheek. "Whatever happens, remember, love isn't shameful. Even if the world rejects it, it's still pure." Zuri nodded and held his hand tightly. Under the stars they stood together, knowing the peace they had might not last. The night was beautiful, but in their hearts, a quiet fear began to grow, a fear of what tomorrow might bring. Still, as long as they had that moment, they were happy. For love, even in secret, was worth every risk they took. That evening, Zuri sat in her room staring at the small oil lamp beside her bed. The flame flickered softly, but her heart felt heavy. She had spent weeks thinking about this moment, the moment she would tell her parents about Kato. Every night she imagined how it might go. She hoped they would understand, that they would see the goodness she saw in him. But deep inside she feared the truth, they would never accept a farmer for their only daughter. After dinner she found her parents sitting in the living room. Her mother was reading a magazine, and her father was going through papers from his business. The room smelled of rich perfume and fresh coffee. Everything around her was clean, expensive, and calm, a world so different from the dusty roads and fruit stalls of the market. She took a deep breath. "Mama, Papa, I need to tell you something." Her mother looked up, surprised by the seriousness in her tone. "What is it, my dear?" Zuri hesitated. "I've met someone." Her father's eyes lifted from the papers. "Someone?" he asked slowly. "Who?" "His name is Kato," she said softly. "He's a farmer in the nearby village." For a moment there was silence. Then her mother's hand froze midair. "A farmer?" she repeated. Her father leaned back in his chair. You mean one of those men who sell fruits in the market? Zuri nodded. Yes. He's kind, hardworking, and honest. I love him. Mr. Mbeal frowned, his face turning hard. Love? He said sharply. You think love is enough? You, my daughter, who grew up in comfort, what do you know about living in a hut or walking in mud? Zuri's heart pounded, but she stood firm. Papa, I've seen how he lives. He works with his hands, but he's proud of it. He doesn't lie, he doesn't pretend. He treats me with respect, more than some rich men I've met. Her mother shook her head slowly. Zuri, please. You're young. You don't understand how life works. This farmer might seem kind now, but love can't feed you. It can't buy you a home or clothes or comfort. Zuri felt her throat tighten. But Mama, I don't want comfort without peace. I want a life that feels real. Her father slammed his hand on the table, making her jump. Enough, he shouted. You will not bring shame to this family. I did not work hard all my life so my daughter could marry a poor farmer. Tears filled her eyes. Papa, please? But his voice cut her off, firm and cold. If you marry him, do not come back to this house. The words struck like a knife. For a long moment, the room was silent. Her mother looked at her husband, shocked, but said nothing. She wanted to speak, but fear kept her quiet. Zuri looked between them, her vision blurry from tears. So that's it, she whispered. You care more about money than my happiness? Her father turned away. You don't understand now, but one day you will. She wiped her tears and stood. Maybe one day you'll understand too. That night, Zuri packed a small bag. She took only a few clothes, a photo of her late grandmother, and a book Cato had given her, a small gift he had bought from a roadside stall. As she walked down the long hallway, her heart broke with every step. The house that once felt warm now felt empty and cold. Her mother came to the door quietly. Zuri, she whispered. Please think before you go. Zuri turned, her face wet with tears. Mama, I have thought about it. I love him. Her mother looked down, her eyes full of sorrow. Then go, my child. But know this, you'll always have a mother who prays for you. Zuri hugged her tightly, then walked out into the night. The air was cool, and the stars shone above like tiny lanterns guiding her path. Her feet carried her down the road toward the village, her heart both heavy and free. When she reached the edge of the village, she saw a small light glowing near the fields. It was Cato's home, a small hut made of clay and wood, with smoke rising from a fire outside. Cato was sitting on a stool, fixing his basket. When he saw her, he stood up quickly. Zuri, he said, shocked. What are you doing here? She dropped her bag and ran into his arms, crying. They won't accept us, Cato. They told me to leave. He held her close, his heart breaking for her pain. You shouldn't have left your home for me, he said softly. She looked up at him. Home is where love lives, Cato. My heart is here. He was silent for a moment, then smiled faintly. Then we'll build a new home together? And they did. The next morning, Cato and Zuri started their new life. They built a small house near his farm, a simple structure made of clay walls and a thatched roof. It was not much, but it was theirs. Zuri helped him with the chores, learning how to fetch water, plant seeds, and cook with firewood. At first it was difficult. Her hands, soft from years of comfort, became rough and blistered. The heat was strong, the work endless. Sometimes she missed her bed, her mother's food, and the sound of city life. But each night, when she sat beside Cato under the stars, she felt something she had never felt before, peace. Cato was gentle and patient. When she made mistakes, he would laugh softly and say, the land takes time to understand. Just like love. They shared everything, their work, their meals, their dreams. On rainy days, they sat inside their small home, listening to the sound of water hitting the roof and talked about their future. I want to plant more next season, Cato would say. Maybe maize and beans. Enough to feed others too. Zuri smiled. And I'll open a small reading hut for the village children. I can teach them in the evenings. Their love grew stronger with each passing day. The people of the village soon learned about Zuri and were amazed by her kindness. She greeted everyone with respect, helped the women at the well, and played with the children. Though her clothes were simple now, her heart was full. Sometimes, when she looked toward the distant hills, she thought of her parents. She missed them, but she knew she had made the right choice. Back in the town, her mother often stared at Zuri's empty chair at dinner, her eyes full of regret. Her father never spoke about her, but sometimes he would walk to the window and stare at the stars, his face softening for a moment before turning away. Months passed and Zuri and Cato's farm began to grow. Their love and hard work turned the dry land green. They planted trees, grew vegetables, and even built a small chicken coop. Each day began with laughter and ended with quiet joy. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Zuri looked at Kato and said, "Do you ever wish things had been different?" Kato shook his head. "No. Because if things were different, maybe we wouldn't have found each other." Zuri smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "Then I'm glad I left that night." And as the stars appeared above them, Zuri realized something she had always known in her heart, that true love may not be rich, but it never runs out. It grows like the crops in Kato's field, strong and full of life, even after the hardest rain. 2 years had passed since Zuri left her wealthy home and joined Kato in his simple village life. In that time, the small clay house they built together had become a home filled with laughter, hard work, and love. Each morning, the sun rose over the hills, painting the fields in gold and green, and they would work side by side, Zuri carrying baskets of vegetables, Kato tending to the soil. Life was hard, but it was honest and full of meaning. One bright morning, while Zuri was collecting eggs from the chicken coop, she noticed a group of men approaching along the dirt road. They were dressed in clean suits, their shoes shining even in the dust. Their appearance was unusual in the quiet village, and the villagers stepped aside to watch silently. Zuri's heart beat faster as the men came closer. At the front was a tall man holding a folder and a tablet. He stopped in front of Kato, bowing slightly. "Mr. Katembo," he said politely, "the board is ready. Your company is waiting for you in the city." Zuri froze. "Company?" she whispered, her voice trembling. What is happening?" Kato smiled gently and put his arm around her. "Zuri," he said softly, "I wanted to tell you this when the time was right. Before I took over my father's business, I needed to live among the people. I wanted to understand their lives, their struggles, and what they truly needed. I did not want anyone to love me for my wealth, only for who I am." Zuri's mouth opened and she felt the world tilt around her. She had spent years thinking Kato was just a simple farmer, a man who lived from his land and his hard work. She had loved him for that, for his honesty, his kindness, and his pure heart. Now she realized he had tested her heart all along. "You tested me?" she asked, her voice breaking and tears welled up in her eyes. Kato took both her hands in his. "Yes," he said gently. "I had to know that you loved me for me, not for the money or status I might inherit. And your heart passed the test." Zuri felt a mix of shock, relief, and joy all at once. She wrapped her arms around him and held him tight, feeling the warmth of his body against hers. "I loved you for who you are, Kato. I would have followed you anywhere, even if we had nothing." He smiled against her hair. "And you did. That is why I knew I could trust you with my life and heart." The men in suits began to speak with Kato quietly, discussing papers and documents. Zuri listened from a short distance, still in awe of what she had just learned. Kato, who had lived as a humble farmer, was now the rightful heir of a large company in the city, a company that could have given him wealth and status long ago. But he had chosen simplicity first, love and honesty before money. For hours, Zuri and Kato sat together under the baobab tree, recounting the past 2 years. They laughed at the memories of small failures in the garden, at her first attempts to milk the cows, and at the time she accidentally spilled a basket of tomatoes on the muddy path. "You were terrible at carrying baskets," Kato teased. Zuri laughed through her tears. "And you never let me forget it." They both laughed, but in their hearts they understood the weight of the moment. The world outside the village might now see Kato as wealthy and powerful, but to Zuri, he had always been rich in the ways that mattered, in kindness, honesty, and love. Kato finally turned to her and said, "Zuri, if we leave for the city tomorrow, life will change. The people here will see me differently, and your family will learn the truth about us. Are you ready for that?" Zuri took a deep breath and looked around at the village, the fields, the river, the small houses, and even the dust in the roads. This had been their world, their sanctuary. But she also knew that love and courage would carry them through anything. "I am ready," she said firmly. "I have loved you through everything. I will love you through anything the city throws at us." Kato smiled and kissed her forehead. "Then we will go together." That evening they walked through the fields one last time. The sun dipped behind the hills, casting long shadows across the land that had witnessed their love grow. Birds flew across the sky, and the river sparkled like silver in the fading light. Kato held her hand tightly, and Zuri leaned into him, feeling safe and certain in a way she had never felt before. As night fell, the village settled into quiet. Crickets chirped and the soft wind whispered through the trees. Zuri sat beside Kato on a small wooden bench near their house. "Do you ever regret living here first?" she asked softly. Kato shook his head. Never. I wanted to understand life from the bottom before I reached the top. I wanted to be sure that the woman I loved would love the man, not the money. And now I am sure, you love me for who I am, Zuri. That is everything to me. Her heart swelled. And you, Cato, have taught me that life is richer when it is simple and honest. They sat in silence, watching the stars appear one by one. Their hands remained entwined, and they felt a quiet joy, knowing that nothing in the world could undo the trust and love they had built together. The next morning, the men in suits returned to take Cato to the city. Zuri packed their few belongings, carrying them with the same hands that had grown strong in village life. The villagers came to see them off, offering smiles and blessings. Cato promised he would return often, but Zuri knew that no matter where they went, the village would always be in their hearts. As they walked toward the car, Zuri glanced at the fields where they had spent countless hours together. She smiled through her tears, whispering, "Thank you for letting me love you first, Cato. That is the greatest gift of all." Cato squeezed her hand. "And thank you, Zuri, for showing me that love is worth everything. With you, I have everything I need no matter where we go." The car drove away slowly, leaving behind the village and their simple home, but carrying with them a love that had been tested, proven, and strengthened. A love that would guide them through every challenge, every change, and every new beginning in the life that awaited them in the city. The morning sunlight spilled across the village as Zuri's parents drove along the dusty road. Their car stirred up small clouds of dust, but their minds were heavier than the air around them. The news they had received the night before had left them speechless. Cato, the humble farmer they had once scorned, was not just a simple man but the rightful heir of a large company. The realization struck them hard. They had judged their daughter's happiness by money and status, and now they understood the truth too late. When they arrived at the small clay house, everything looked just as it had 2 years ago, simple, neat, and full of life. Zuri and Cato were outside, tending to a small vegetable patch. Zuri's hands were covered in soil, and Cato was laughing as he fixed a fence post. Their ease and joy filled the air like the scent of fresh earth after rain. For a long moment Mr. and Mrs. Mbeal just stared. It was strange for them to see their daughter, once dressed in fine silks, now covered in dirt but glowing with happiness. And next to her was the man they had rejected, a farmer in appearance, but now known to be someone of wealth and honor. Finally Mr. Mbeal spoke, his voice soft and uncertain. "My daughter, I was wrong. I judged by wealth, not by heart. Can you forgive me?" Zuri stopped working and turned to face him. Her eyes were full of emotion, but her smile was calm and kind. She stepped forward, brushing the dirt from her dress. "Love teaches us all, Papa," she said gently. "It shows us what is important, what lasts, and what truly matters." Her father's eyes filled with tears. He looked at Cato, who had straightened up and was standing respectfully. Cato extended his hand and shook Mr. Mbeal's with a steady grip. "Sir," he said quietly, "your daughter is the reason I believe in true love. She loved me for who I am, not for what I have. That is more valuable than any fortune." Her mother stepped forward, dabbing at her eyes with a cloth. "You have taught us what riches truly mean," she whispered. "It is not in gold or houses or status. It is in love, in honesty, in respect." Zuri's heart swelled as she watched her parents' faces soften. They had finally seen the truth, that life's greatest treasures were not measured in wealth, but in the goodness of the heart. The family spent the morning talking under the shade of the baobab tree. They shared stories, laughed, and even cried together. Zuri introduced her parents to the village children she had helped teach, and Cato showed them how he tended the land. Each moment bridged the years of misunderstanding and distance. By afternoon, the sun cast long shadows over the fields, and a quiet peace settled over them. Zuri looked at Cato, holding his hand as she had done countless times before, and felt a deep contentment. She had chosen love, and now that choice had healed not only her life but the hearts of her parents as well. In the weeks that followed, the families became close again. Mr. and Mrs. Mbeal visited often, learning to enjoy the simplicity of village life and appreciating the lessons it taught them. Zuri and Cato, though aware of their new wealth, chose to maintain the humility and hard work that had brought them happiness. Eventually, they returned to the city to take over Cato's company. But they did so with a different purpose than most people expected. They ran the business with kindness, ensuring that their workers were treated fairly, that farmers received good prices for their crops, and that the community benefited from their success. Money was no longer the measure of life. Respect, love, and honesty guided every decision they made. Whenever someone asked about their story, Zuri would smile and say, "Never look down on anyone, you never know who they truly are." Their story became a lesson for many in the city and the village alike. It reminded people that wealth could be found in many forms, that the richest hearts were often hidden in the simplest lives, and that true happiness came not from gold or fame but from love, understanding, and humility. Zuri and Kato continued to live a life full of joy. They planted trees that would shade the village for generations, built schools to teach children to read and write, and shared their blessings with neighbors. Their love never wavered, growing stronger with each passing day, rooted deeply in respect, trust, and shared dreams. And though they now moved between the world of wealth and the village, they never forgot the life that had shaped them: the small clay house, the fields, the river, and the lessons of patience and honesty. Every morning they would walk through the land where their love had first bloomed, remembering the struggles, the laughter, and the tears that had made them who they were. In the end, the Mbeel family learned humility, Kato gained recognition without losing himself, and Zuri found the love she had always dreamed of. Their story spread quietly at first, told by neighbors and friends, and then more widely, a story that reminded everyone who heard it that the heart sees what wealth cannot, and that love, when chosen wisely, conquers all. The village remained their sanctuary, the city became their responsibility, and their hearts carried both worlds, grounded in simplicity, yet reaching for greatness. Their legacy was not gold nor power, but a life lived with love, respect, and the courage to follow the heart wherever it led.